Good morning, everyone. Welcome today. My name is Patricia Cabral. I'm the Legal Policy Officer at the European Network on Statelessness. And it is a pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of ENS to this webinar on deprivation of nationality and the prevention of statelessness. For those of you who are not familiar with ENS, we are a civil society alliance of over 170 organizations and individual experts working to address statelessness in 41 European countries. And we do this through law and policy development, awareness raising, and capacity building. We are very excited to have almost 200 people registered to participate today. So please feel free to say hello in the chat. Tell us your name, your organization, your country of work, or the country you are joining us from today. And we are also posting a quick poll now to find a bit more about our audience today. In the meantime, I will tell you a little bit more about the webinar and the fantastic lineup of speakers that we have for you today. And while we're getting these questions in, I really want to welcome all the diversity and all the range of participants we have with us today. So before just going through the line of speakers, I just want to walk you through some housekeeping first. Just to let you know that we are recording this session and the video and the materials will be available after the session and emailed to you. The names of the participants and the chat will not be available in the recording. Participants' microphones and cameras are switched off, but please feel free to use the chat function to ask questions as we go along by selecting all panelists and attendees when you send the message. And we will try to answer your questions during the session or hopefully afterwards if we don't manage to go through all of them. And please feel free to email us after the session if you have any further questions, any comments or feedback. They're always very welcome and we do look forward to staying in touch with you. So today we are launching a new briefing on deprivation of nationality and the prevention of statelessness in Europe. The aim of today's webinar is to present the key findings of the briefing and our recommendations for action to prevent statelessness in the context of deprivation of nationality. The briefing is the second in a series of thematic briefings drawing on the data in our Statelessness Index, which is an online comparative tool that assesses how 27 countries in Europe protect stateless people and what they are doing to prevent and reduce statelessness. Last year, we published a thematic briefing on birth registration, and we are now preparing another briefing on statelessness determination and protection status that will be published in September. In the past year, we have been working in close collaboration with the Human Rights Implementation Center of the University of Bristol as part of a knowledge exchange partnership with Dr. Rachel Pougnet, funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. And the purpose of this collaboration is to investigate the effect of citizenship stripping on statelessness, to raise awareness around the growing practice of citizenship deprivation in Europe, and to engage in further research aimed at informing our law and policy development and our capacity building activities. So this particular briefing that we are launching today is a project of this collaboration with the University of Bristol, and particularly with Rachel, who you will hear from just in a moment. And for those of you who have not yet seen the briefing, you can access it on our website. And I believe the link will be shared in the chat soon if it hasn't been already. And we will also email you the briefing after the session. So today, Rachel will start by presenting the main research findings and our key recommendations. And after that, we are delighted to have with us Leonard Cole, who is a human rights consultant and mediator in Austria, and will share key elements of the law and policy on deprivation of nationality in Austria. Then we will hear from López Álvarez, who is a Deputy Director General of Nationality and Civil Status in Spain, commenting on some of the good practice in this area in Spain. And after that, we will focus on actions needed at the regional level, and we will give the floor to Tineke Strik, who is a member of the European Parliament. And finally, our last speaker will be Laura van Waas, who is the founder and co-director of the Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion, and will present their work on citizenship stripping and discuss some of the trends on deprivation of nationality and the key actions needed. Then there will be some time for questions. So please post your questions in the chat, and we will try to put them to the speakers at the end. And if we cannot go through all of the questions, we will try and get back to you after the session. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Rachel, who is Rachel. Sorry, Rachel, I'm not sure. Okay, we can see you now at the moment. That's great. So Rachel is a senior research associate at the University of Bristol, specialized in the fields of citizenship and national security. And her PhD research focused on a comparative inquiry into the practice of citizenship deprivation in the context of France in the UK. And she will present the key findings of the briefing to you. So Rachel, over to you. I just need to turn my microphone. Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Patricia, for this warm welcome. So in this short presentation, I will start by presenting an overview of how the index countries present in the Statelessness Index perform against international norms and good practices on deprivation of nationality. I'll then zoom in on core issues where the tension between deprivation of nationality and statelessness are salient. And I'll conclude by highlighting key areas where we thought that action was needed from a government as well as regional organizations and key stakeholders to ensure that everyone's right to nationality is protected. So, as you all know, deprivation of the nationality is on the rise. So whether it is for the purposes of safeguarding national security or to answer growing concerns around fraud-based acquisition of nationality, states have increasingly rolled back on citizenship rights. And this creates fundamental issues in terms of course, access to rights and services, as well as exclusion, and of course, statelessness. And this is despite the fact that international law really limits the ability of states to deprive individuals of their nationality, and especially if this results in statelessness. And from what you can see on this table is that most of our index countries kind of reflect this trend insofar as most of them have a mixed results of positive and negative practices in terms of deprivation of nationality and the prevention of statelessness. But some of the key good practices that we have identified in the briefing is where the prevention of statelessness is safeguarded for each ground of deprivation of nationality. And this is the case in Portugal, for example, where even in instances of fraud-based acquisition of nationality, deprivation of nationality can never lead to statelessness. However, in many other states, such as Cyprus, the states have multiple grounds to deprive individuals of their nationality, and these multiple grounds do not necessarily always safeguard statelessness. And even in instances where deprivation of nationality is enshrined in the legal framework of the state, it's really important for states to enshrine key procedural safeguards and to ensure that individuals have access to these key procedural safeguards. And one of the key good practice in this area is when decisions to deprive individuals of their nationality are taken by a court, thereby ensuring that the decision to deprive an individual follows a finding of guilt by a civil or criminal court. And this is something that we see in Belgium as well as in Spain. Another key good practice is, of course, for individuals to be able to challenge the decision to deprive them of their nationality and to secure the right of appeal, as well as to ensure that individuals would be provided with legal aid. And in most states, really, almost all of the countries of the index demonstrate good practice in this area, insofar as the right to of appeal is safeguarded. However, this is not the case in Bulgaria. And Bulgaria is interesting insofar as the prevention of statelessness, insofar as statelessness is precluded for all the different grounds of deprivation of nationality. However, in instances where statelessness will not have been identified by the state prior to making a deprivation order, that means that the individual who has been deprived of his nationality and who's been left stateless doesn't have any forum or any way to challenge this decision. And another key issue that we've seen as well in light of recent events is when individuals who have been deprived of their citizenship whilst they're abroad and when they have been precluded from entering to their country of former nationality and in order to conduct their appeal. And this issue was salient in the case of Shamima Begum in the UK. And I guess as most of you will know, in 2021, the Supreme Court of the UK decided that Shamima Begum should not be allowed back to the UK in order to conduct her appeal, that her appeal should be stayed, and that she should stay in Northeast Syria, where she currently is. And that brings me to my second point, which is the relationship or the tension between national security and deprivation of nationality, as well as statelessness, because Begum was deprived of a nationality on national security ground. And from what we've witnessed over the last few years is really a domino effect within countries in Europe, as well as in most parts of the world, where states are increasingly turning to deprivation of national security, of deprivation of nationality as a counterterrorism measure. And this is a trend that we see within our index countries, because 9 states have modified their legislation since 2010 in order either to include this provision into their legal framework or to expand existing powers. And this is the case in the UK, for example, where in 2014, the UK government introduced a new bill that allows the state to deprive individuals of the nationality on national security grounds, even if that leads to statelessness, provided that these individuals are naturalized citizens. And what we've seen in our analysis is that even in instances where statelessness is safeguarded, because, for example, deprivation of nationality would only apply to multiple nationality holders. Well, in these cases, and this is something that we really saw in the UK, the states engage in inadequate determination of statelessness prior to depriving an individual of his or her nationality. And that's something that we saw in the cases of Begum again, as well as in the case of Pham, and I'll be happy to develop on this point further later. And I think, and a similarity between Begum and Pham, as well as between most people who are exposed to deprivation of nationality, is that these individuals are people who have a foreign heritage, who have some form of connection with another state. And this is puzzling insofar as international law prohibits deprivation of nationality if this would lead, when it is grounded on ethnicity, race, or political grounds. But what we see in our index countries is that most states, all states actually, distinguish either between single and multiple nationality holders or between individuals according to their route to citizenship, reserving deprivation of nationality for individuals who have acquired citizenship after birth, for example. And in the first case, so this distinction between single and multiple nationality holders, if the rationale behind it is to prevent statelessness, it still leads to some form of discrimination based on origin. And in any case, this distinction between individuals according to their degree of foreignness really risks normalizing or legalizing racialized inequalities, which are deeply embedded within our societies. But moving away from deprivation of nationality a bit, let's not forget that if international law protects the right for us to keep our nationality, it also protects the right for people to change the nationality, so long as it does not result in statelessness. And most states, almost all states of the Statelessness Index present good practices in this area, but we still have identified some barriers in some contexts, such as in Austria, where the state answers to a strict single nationality rule, which requires individuals to relinquish their former nationalities before acquiring Austrian nationality, but there's no guarantee that the state would not revoke this grant of naturalization if the circumstances were changing. But I'll leave it to our Austrian expert in this panel to potentially expand on this issue. So from these analyses, we have identified 4 key action areas, which are much more detailed in the briefing. The 4 action area is for states to provide clear, updated, and accessible data on deprivation of nationality. This is an issue that was constantly reported by our experts, and this data needs to be disaggregated at least in terms of age, sex, gender, nationality, grounds of deprivation, and etc. Another key action area is for state to introduce or improve safeguards to prevent statelessness in all cases of deprivation or renunciation of nationality. The third key action area is for states to guarantee effective procedural safeguards for all decisions on deprivation of nationality. And last but not least, states should really avoid using deprivation of nationality for the purposes of safeguarding national security. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. That was a really comprehensive overview of the briefing. And just a reminder for those of you who haven't seen it yet, the briefing is available on our website, and a link has also been shared in the chat box. So do feel free to read through it after the session to explore a bit more of the issues that Rachel just mentioned. And with that, I want to turn to our panel of invited experts to hear their reflections, responses, and some more recommendations on the way forward. And first of all, it's a pleasure to introduce you to Leonard Cole, who is a human rights consultant and mediator, currently working as a political advisor on asylum and immigration for the Greens in the Austrian Parliament. And Leo is also an individual ENS member, and he's also our lead country expert for the Statelessness Index in Austria. So Leo, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Patricia, for the warm welcome and introduction. It's a great honor for me to speak, to briefly speak about the Austria example today, although I am afraid, as you can see from the thematic briefing and also from Rachel's slide before, it is not really a good example. While Austria is state party to the 4 statelessness specific conventions, many of them and many of the provisions are not translated effectively into national law, or are simply not considered in the decision practice of authorities or courts. This is all highlighted by ENS, UNHCR, and stakeholders on the national level, and was also highlighted recently in the opinion of Advocate General Spooner in a case pending before the CJEU, which I will touch later on. I will now talk about 4 main points. First, a positive note. Austria's recent changes in deprivation of nationality for the purposes of safeguarding national security. Then I would touch the more difficult parts, Austria's very strict single nationality rule and discriminatory practices relating to derivative loss of nationality. And I will conclude with a potential positive note from the Court of Justice of the European Union. But before touching the protection gaps, let me start with a positive note. As mentioned before, in reaction to the terror attack in Vienna on 2nd November 2020, political parties from all spectrums demanded tough reactions, not only by measures of criminal law, but also by stripping terrorists of the Austrian nationality, no matter if this would make them stateless. This came with earlier debates on foreign terrorist fighters, when again political parties from all spectrums, left and right, demanded that kind of the tough state should preside over prevention of statelessness. But despite all pressures, also from civil society, fortunately, the newly adopted law on deprivation of nationality in cases of threats to national security has a safeguard in place and cannot be applied if a person thereby becomes stateless. So a good start, and it can only now be aimed at dual nationals like the terrorist of Vienna himself. It was very fortunate and also a surprise, and maybe a starting point for optimists for further good changes. Now I'm moving over to the second point. Austria's very strict single nationality rule, and that's good to know that among them, among the few remaining state parties to the Convention on the Reduction of Cases of Multiple Nationality, Austria is also still a state party. Among Denmark, Norway, and the Netherlands, only 4 remaining, and this sets the field for Austria's still very restrictive regime in this regard. I will talk about 2 contexts where this becomes apparent. First, the automatic loss of nationality, and second, the duty to relinquish all former nationalities in cases of naturalization, if you want to apply for Austrian nationality. First, the automatic loss. A person who acquires a foreign nationality upon his application, his declaration, or his express consent automatically loses Austrian nationality if he was not granted the right to retain Austrian nationality before. There are some safeguards, and people can be permitted to retain Austrian nationality upon their written request if it is in the interests of the Republic of Austria, or if it is in the child's best interest. The problem now is, in many cases, those procedures are initiated ex officio without the persons affected ever knowing, or they only get to know about the final result when they lose Austrian nationality. This was the case between 2017 and 2018. This provision on automatic loss was applied vis-à-vis Austrian nationals who were believed to have acquired Turkish nationality upon their explicit declaration of intent. Provincial governments initiated thousands of procedures after more or less dubious Excel spreadsheets had been leaked to the authorities containing thousands of names and dates of Austrian nationals who were believed to be able to vote at the then upcoming presidential elections. And so they were believed to be Turkish nationals. Many putative dual nationals were then handed administrative decisions determining the automatic loss of Austrian nationality and often making them stateless, even if they were born and raised in Austria, spent their whole life here. The courts in appeal procedures, in a majority of cases, did not lift those decisions until December 2018, when the Constitutional Court ruled that these spreadsheets, these lists, were not authentic and could not justify, without other pieces of evidence, automatic loss of nationality. And only until the Court of Justice of the European Union's decision in the case of Chavez and others, now authorities and courts apply the proportionality tests, which was not done before, since authorities and courts held the former ruling in the case of Rothman to be not applicable. The situation has calmed now, but with elections in Turkey ahead in 2023, we already receive reports from legal practitioners who see that, I see René de Groot says only 2 countries are still party to. Thanks very much for that correction. We already see new cases, and it will be important to observe whether authorities and courts apply proportionality tests and see if the consequence of losing Austrian nationality is really in relation to what has happened before. Now, a second point, Austrian law requires a person to relinquish all former nationalities, including EU nationalities, before he or she can acquire Austrian nationality. Until proof is shown, applicants for Austrian nationality receive only a temporary guarantee of grant of Austrian nationality, which is conditional upon the individual, the applicant, fulfilling the requirements for naturalizations. There are some safeguards stipulated in the law, like this rule cannot be applied vis-à-vis stateless people, obviously, or if he or she gives proof that she was unable or could not be expected to relinquish a nationality. For example, if the state concerned that does not allow for relinquishing nationality. So exactly the problematic consequences of this provision were highlighted in a case pending before the CJEU, where the applicant, a former Estonian national, became stateless because of administrative offenses related to road safety. In the meantime, between she was granted she was assured to get the grant of Austrian nationality and renounced her Estonian nationality. So Patricia, I see my time might be running out. This case is now pending before the CJU, and on 1st of July, Advocate General Spooner published his opinion, which is a great starting point for advocacy on the national level because of his 4 conclusions. First, he deems EU law to be applicable, although the applicant is currently no longer an EU citizen. Second, he highlights that Austria lags behind its international obligations relating to the prevention of statelessness. Third, EU law does not preclude such provisions, but provided that the decision is compatible with the principle of proportionality. And he concludes that this was not the case with the former Estonian national who is now stateless due to not failing to display a vehicle inspection disc and driving a motor vehicle while under the influence, which led international experts remarking that if you want to apply for Austrian nationality, better not come by car. Thank you very much, and sorry for speaking too long.
Thank you, Leo, and apologies for the time pressure, but it's always very interesting to hear from you, and thank you for presenting the not so good practice in Austria, but also some recent developments both in the national courts and the Court of Justice that may lead to improved safeguards to prevent statelessness. So next I will introduce you to Mar López Álvarez, Deputy Director General of Nationality and Civil Status in Spain. And Mar, I will pass the word to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. And first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to this event, which I enjoy being here, and congratulations for the perfect organization that I am seeing. Well, Spain is not too badly positioned in the statelessness issue. I think we have made big efforts since our ratification of the convention relating to the status of stateless person in New York, 1954, that happened in 1997. And also we ratified the Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness in 1961. But to the point that we should concentrate today, which is the loss of nationality. Well, all our regulation and mostly is contained in our civil code. And I will not go over how you acquire the Spanish nationality, but I will concentrate on the reasons to lose the Spanish nationality, which are clearly divided into people that were Spanish nationals from originally Spanish, and those who acquired the Spanish nationality. So in the first case, we have Article 24 of the Civil Code, which states the reasons and the circumstances in which a Spanish national born Spanish can lose its Spanish nationality. And Article 1 states that adults living abroad, so that's the first condition, they live abroad, and that voluntarily acquire another nationality. So the acquisition of the second nationality must be an act of will. Or they exclusively use the second nationality that has been attributed to them before coming of age. So living abroad and they have acquired a nationality before coming of age. They can lose the Spanish nationality if they don't state at the civil register, at the Spanish civil register in the country where they live, their will to continue being Spanish. So they can avoid losing their Spanish nationality in this case if they just go to a civil register at the consulate, at the embassy, and state that they want to maintain their Spanish nationality. So that's for Article 1. Now there is a second case, which is for Spanish of origin who have been born Spanish, okay, but they expressly renounce their will to expressly renounce their Spanish nationality. They have to habitually reside abroad and have another nationality available. If not, then this renunciation is not accepted, okay? And also they have to be of age. That's the other condition. So as you can see, there is a couple of requirements for the acceptation of this renunciation of the Spanish nationality, basically being of age and have another nationality available, okay? And there is a third case, which is adults living abroad and being born also abroad to Spanish parents that also were born abroad. So our Article 24 says that in these cases, if all these conditions are met, and also their country of residence gives them its nationality, then they lose the Spanish nationality unless a declaration is made at the Spanish consulate, at the sealed register, stating that they want to maintain it. That has only an exception. Also, in this case, they will not lose their nationality if Spain is at that time in war, in a war, okay? So that would be the case for the Spanish that are national of origin, that were born Spanish. Another thing is for those who acquire Spanish nationality in any of the different ways that Spanish nationality can be acquired. So when it is detected that during 3 years, the Spanish nationality is not used, for example, a Spanish passport expired and the person did not apply for a new passport during more than 3 years. That could be an example. Then this person can be deprived of the Spanish nationality if they have another nationality, not in another case, okay? And also that has also the exception that I said before, which is if they go to a Spanish civil register at the consulate or at the embassy, and they declare their will to maintain the Spanish nationality. That has been a change in the last years, because in the past it was considered that this declaration could only be made by Spanish that were Spanish by origin. Now this criteria has been changed, and is also maintained. The Spanish nationality is maintained for people that have acquired the Spanish nationality. So this is one of the cases when the Spanish nationality can be lost. Another one is if a court sentence declares that the nationality was acquired by means of false documents, concealment, fraud, but this only can be done in the next 15 years after awarding the nationality. After that, it is not possible. And also, this loss of nationality will not affect third parties. For example, will not affect the children of this person or the wife or others that have acquired the nationality due to this first person, okay? And a third case is when a person that has acquired the Spanish nationality serves in the army of a foreign country, or is appointed to a political position against the express prohibition of the Spanish government. In this case, this person can also be deprived of the Spanish nationality. There is Patricia. There is Rachel. Okay, got it. Now, there is also one possibility that is not in our civil code, but it is in our administrative laws, which is when it is detected that Spanish nationality was awarded against, and this person did not meet the requirements, then this person can be deprived. But then this is a very difficult procedure. It means that first there has been an administrative procedure, which ends at the Council of Ministers with a declaration that this person was not due the Spanish nationality. And with this declaration, we have to go to court against our decision of conceding the nationality. And the court has to emit a sentence. Only after that, this person can be deprived of nationality. So I will end up here. Thank you very much for the attention, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Mar. And it is great to hear some good examples from Spain as well. And as we are running a bit short in time as well, I'll just introduce you now to our next speaker, Tineke. Tineke, you may have seen her in our webinars before. She's a member of the European Parliament, including a member of the Libe community. And Tineke was also a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe until 2019. Tineke, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you also from my side. Thanks a lot for this invitation and for organizing this very informative meeting, and also for, of course, presenting the thematic briefing, which is, I think, very helpful because, of course, we first need to have the overview of the facts and the tendencies in order to be able to tackle certain concerning developments. And that was actually also exactly the reason why I started drafting my report on for the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. I was a member indeed until 2019, and I was also a member of the Dutch Senate, and there I had to deal with a bill which enabled the government to withdraw nationality in case of certain behavior of citizens abroad, if they could link it to terrorist organizations. So it was a very thin basis actually, and the deprivation would only be based on an administrative decision of a minister without the need to have any criminal conviction ahead of it. So that leads to a lot of human rights concerns, and also concerns on effectiveness, but also procedural safeguards and the relationship with the conventions that are at stake. And therefore, I wanted to know, does it happen in more countries? Is this really a tendency that we see across the European countries, and what could we do with that? So I mapped also the tendencies and wrote recommendations. And we looked at various reasons for deprivation, but merely to terrorist-related reasons, because this was actually the new tendency that we saw. And actually, what we found is very much similar, of course, that's not such a coincidence, with the thematic briefing that was just presented. So we saw a wide interpretation of certain criteria, for instance, at the European Convention on Nationality, on if the conduct is seriously prejudicial to vital interest of a state. Too wide was our view. It sometimes really leads to statelessness, despite the guarantees in the conventions. There's often differentiation between the treatment of, based on the way someone has gained the nationality of a state. and there's a clear different treatment between those with one nationality and people with a dual nationality, even if they got it by birth. So the tendency, and there's also a tendency not only to withdraw citizenship after a criminal conviction, but also, as we saw in the Netherlands, based on an administrative decision, sometimes by court, but also sometimes even by a minister. And if this can be done with the person still being abroad, because it's merely aimed at preventing the entrance of the person, then you can imagine that the procedural safeguards are insufficient. If the person is even sometimes not informed, cannot be heard, and this goes against all safeguards that are in international law clearly established. And it also leaves the responsibility for combating security concerns to third countries where the people reside. So this is also what we said in our report. This is also undermining the obligation to show solidarity if it comes to international combating terrorist crimes, because you undermine, you avoid your own responsibility, even if you have the instruments in place, namely national criminal law to tackle the security concerns. And what I found also interesting in that regard, I got a lot of support in the Parliamentary Assembly and also many parliamentarians from previous communist countries, so more from the Eastern European countries. They were very much aware of the arbitrary use of certain regimes, in order just to combat their political opponents, just instrumentalize the nationality law in order to fight, to gain power or to keep the power. So I thought that was a very interesting one. Sometimes in Western European countries, we are not so much aware that this is also a very important element that we need to prevent arbitrariness and abuse of power. What I found interesting is later on, I was not in the Parliamentary Assembly anymore, but the Committee of Ministers has sent in a reply to my recommendations, and these are rather positive. They were very much inclined to indeed come up with guidelines on the way those criteria have to be used. And they also were in favor of conducting a comparative study in order to see what guidance they should give to prevent arbitrary policy. So that could be something for the network to follow up on, because I think the Council of Europe is very well placed to have a vigilant policy on this. This is much different in the EU, I must say, because now, of course, we see more and more that it has come clearly in the remits of the EU law with Article 20, paragraph 1 TFEU, and Leonard already mentioned the cases, Rotman, Chebes and others, and also GI, which is currently pending. And where you see that the EU principles and also the Charter of Fundamental Rights are applicable and can be invoked. And I think in GI, you also see very clearly that it's not only anymore about deprivation as such, but there's a very thin line between acquisition on the one hand and deprivation. So that brings in more possibilities to invoke EU law, also if it comes to acquisition, I would think. And here also in the GI case, the legal certainty principle, of course, is very much at stake. And there you see that the European Commission takes the rights position. It says clearly in that case that, if a citizen, an EU citizen coming from another country takes further steps for further integration in a second member state, it should not be confronted with the huge risk or the result of losing all the rights of EU citizenship. But if it comes to policy making, even drafting guidelines, the Commission is pretty hesitant. I just looked at the report that they made on EU citizenship, the EU Citizenship Report 2020. It does not talk about deprivation, acquisition. It's really only focuses on the rights that people have and how that should be ensured and in a non-discriminatory way. But I think that there are sufficient arguments now for the Commission to go a step further. For instance, by drafting guidelines on how member states should have a policy on deprivation or even acquisition in line with Article 20, paragraph 1. I think it should not be so shy anymore. The same with integration policies. The Commission also makes more steps, and it's being more and more accepted, I think, at the national level. Although, of course, regarding citizenship, member states tend to really protect their national discretion. Yeah, I think that's it for now. And I think if it comes to deprivation of citizenship in relation to combating terrorism, the Commission could also use its area on criminal cooperation, of course, by showing also what alternatives should be developed and what policies are the most effective. And it's clear that just depriving someone of the nationality with the risk that someone still stays within the EU somewhere does not really lead to effective combating security threats as well. So I would say let's closely cooperate on this issue. And your briefings are very beneficial to us. But indeed, let's together also increase the awareness at the EU level within the Parliament, but also at the Commission and the Council, that this is an EU concern and an EU competence, and that we could do more on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tineke. That was really a brilliant overview of how we can galvanize action at regional level, and also some very concrete ideas on how to follow up with these issues, including with the Council of Europe and the EU. So thank you very much for that. And our final speaker is Laura van Waas, who is the founder and co-director of the Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion, which is really the only human rights NGO dedicated to promoting the right to nationality and working on the rights of stateless people at the global level. So Laura, I hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Patricia, and thank you to ENS for the opportunity to speak at this event. And let me start by also welcoming the new briefing that's being launched today. I mean, overall, ENS's Statelessness Index is already such a valuable tool for anyone who needs information about nationality and statelessness in Europe. And these thematic briefings help to make the analysis even more accessible for those working on specific topics. Now, the topic of this briefing, as we also heard from Tineke just now, is an especially important and indeed urgent one. In other areas covered by ENS's Statelessness Index, such as the protection of every child's right to a nationality or the establishment of statelessness determination procedures, we've seen gradual progress towards stronger law and policy frameworks that enable better protection of individual rights. However, the trend on this issue has been the reverse. So the briefing provides a snapshot of the state of play as of January 2021, but had it been issued even a few years earlier, the picture would have already been very different. Caught up in a kind of legislative fever around counterterrorism, states have increasingly instrumentalized nationality policy on the pretext of national security. New grounds for nationality deprivation have been introduced, while safeguards that are vital to protecting the institution of citizenship from abuse have also been eroded. Indeed, as the briefing itself mentions, 9 of the 27 countries covered have amended their legislation since 2010 to expand citizenship stripping powers on national security grounds. While today, the majority of democratic states still resist increasing their powers in this regard, this evident renaissance of nationality deprivation is serious cause for concern. Strong criticism has rightly been leveled by international law and human rights experts, Tineke among them, at the measure's discriminatory basis and implementation, its disproportionate impact on minorities, and the resulting erosion of the democratic institution of citizenship. There is meanwhile no evidence that stripping people of their citizenship has a positive effect on national or international security, and security experts in fact attest to its counter-effectiveness, given that it can undermine efforts to investigate and prosecute acts of terrorism and may even contribute in the longer term towards violent radicalization. In light of all of this, in 2020, my organization, the Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion, in collaboration with Open Society Justice Initiative, launched a year of action against citizenship stripping. A major milestone of this year of action was the publication of the Principles on Deprivation of Nationality as a National Security Measure. These were developed over a 30-month research and consultation process with input from more than 60 leading experts in the fields of human rights, nationality and statelessness, counterterrorism, refugee protection, child rights, migration, and other related areas. They provide an authoritative overview of existing international law obligations and apply to all situations in which states take or consider taking steps to deprive a person of nationality as a national security measure. Translation of the principles is now available in Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish, and there's also a detailed draft commentary that sets out the international law basis of each principle. So we really welcome the use of the principles as one of the tools to assist in benchmarking under ENS's Statelessness Index. And we would strongly encourage anyone engaged in policy development or evaluation, in litigation, research, or other activities in relation to citizenship stripping, to also look at the guidance that the principles offer in better understanding what it takes to implement international law obligations and protect against arbitrary deprivation of nationality. To find out more about the issues addressed in the principles, or to deepen your contextual understanding of what the new ENS briefing outlines, I can also recommend ISI's 2020 World Stateless Report, which concentrates on the issue of nationality deprivation, as well as our global seminar series on citizenship stripping. The essays contained in the report and the global seminars recorded talks by leading experts, each accompanied by its own lecture and debate kit, provide a really excellent insight into the history of denationalization, the challenges encountered today in litigating cases, and the human rights and security dimension of the issue, and much more. But back to the substance of the issue, allow me to close with a few brief reflections on the findings of the ENS briefing, again, focusing in particular on the national security context. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, it's really critical to understand international law as an integrated ecosystem of standards, which collectively establish the level of protection that citizenship must enjoy. One international norm cannot be traded off against another. Statelessness must be avoided, but so must direct or indirect discrimination against certain categories of national. If it is not possible to meet both of these standards, as well as to establish the necessity and proportionality of the measure when developing policy or taking an individual decision to deprive nationality, such deprivation does not comply with international law and cannot be pursued. For this reason, while the briefing provides a really useful step-by-step analysis of how countries are faring in terms of different international law benchmarks in relation to citizenship stripping, I urge you also to remember that the failure to meet any one of these benchmarks poses a severe problem and will likely lead to situations of arbitrary deprivation of nationality. With that in mind, and against a backdrop of growing questions about the effectiveness or possible counter-effectiveness of nationality deprivation in the counterterrorism space, it is time for a thorough review of the use, necessity, effectiveness, and wider impact of these new powers. States should also really consider implementing a moratorium on nationality deprivation while policy is being carefully evaluated. Finally, it's really important to acknowledge that powers that have been found upon closer scrutiny to be problematic can be rolled back. Laws can be repealed or amended. Canada, for example, provides us a really good example in this regard. Their recognition that a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian led to a reversal of nationality deprivation policy in the counterterrorism space, in favor instead of other methods that are a better fit for the purpose of protecting national security and bringing individuals involved in terrorist acts to justice, and that do not risk eroding the integrity of citizenship as a cornerstone of democracy. It's my sincere hope that the ENS's new briefing launched today will contribute to a more informed debate on policy choices in respect of nationality deprivation around Europe. And I hope that an updated analysis 10 years from now will show that the trend of the past decade has been reversed. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Laura. And now I'm going to invite all the other speakers to also turn on their cameras. So far, we haven't really received any burning questions from the audience, but we do have a final few minutes left. So I'll maybe just invite each of you to, in 1 minute, say a few concluding remarks and potentially thinking about working together in the future. Rachel, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Patricia. And thank you so much to all speakers for this brilliant presentation. I think I'm going to start very quickly with echoing what I was saying in the briefing, that if Belgium presents good procedural safeguards in the sense that decisions to deprive individuals of the nationality are taken by a court, so does Portugal, and I forgot to mention it during my presentation. And I think I will just conclude for the last 30 seconds by saying how great it has been to be collaborating with ENS, and how important it is for academics from everywhere in the world to engage with civil society actors, as well as with government bodies and etc., and to really seek to build bridges between academia and the outside world, because this is the only way through which we'll be able to fight deprivation of nationality and to ensure that everybody has a right to nationality. And again, I would like to underline the great work of the Institute of Statelessness and Inclusion and the wealth of their data, as well as the Robert Schuman Center and all of this great organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. Very relevant indeed. Leo?
Thank you very much. I'll also only briefly make some final remarks. Thank you so much also from my side for the great cooperation with ENS. I think it's extremely important with all the knowledge I get from you, and with you motivating us here in Austria to build knowledge on the prevention of statelessness and ensuring stateless people's rights, that finally, after years, this field being a blind spot on Austria's human rights record, we can make some changes. I think the most realistic way is using litigation to end statelessness. So we are hoping now for the case pending before the CJEU. And also we try to use these arguments and spread them among legal practitioners, that they can use the same arguments in court procedures pending in Austria, also before the authorities, because I mean, under the current political system, or in this government coalition, I think kind of legal changes are not really legislative changes are not really realistic. So we have to use everything which comes from courts, both from the European level and also from the national side. So thank you very much. Looking forward to great cooperation like before.
We're also looking forward to it. Thank you, Leo. And Mad? No concluding remarks.
There is still a lot of work to do.
Of course.
There is still a lot of work to do, and we I wanted to say that we are planning to introduce a new amendment to our laws, which is to reduce the time that stateless people need to acquire citizenship in Spain, to reduce the time of residence. But it's been reviewed for now 1 year, and it does not pass. I hope in this incoming time it will pass, and we can have this good news.
Thank you, and we are indeed working closely with our members in Spain to also push for that amendment. Tineke, would you like to say a few final words?
Yeah, thanks. I think there's indeed a lot to do, and it would be great if we see a strong cooperation between INS and actors at the national level and the EU level. I think if it comes, it's still to a large extent the discretion of the member states. So it would be great to have more awareness also in national parliaments on the good practices, you know, the alternatives that are out there. Apart from what I said about guidelines by the European Commission, for instance. And I think there should be also more awareness of, you know, what I sometimes hear national officials say, yeah, but, you know, deprivation is a completely different case if someone has a second nationality, which is de facto in many situations pretty much similar to a stateless situation. If it's from a country where someone has never been before and is completely hostile to that person. So that awareness could be raised more, I think. And I think what we also should do is, you know, come up with an integrated vision to, on the one hand, deprivation, but on the other hand, acquisition. Because what could be the risk of having much more stricter criteria on deprivation is that governments tend to create more obstacles for the acquisition of, like the GI case already also shown. So I think it should be clear that, you know, if we really want to further integration, if we want to combat statelessness on both sides, we should show that there needs to be an inclusive policy to be developed. And yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot to INS for all your work in that area.
Thank you so much, Tineke. And we are a bit over time, but Laura, of course, if you want to say a few concluding words, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep it short. I mean, just to say that it's very encouraging to see this growing evidence base now that we're able to talk about what the laws are, and increasingly you have other people joining the conversation about what the impacts are. So people representing communities who feel targeted and stigmatized by the measure, or security experts who are questioning whether this is really the right way to go. So I think we need to really pursue that conversation very actively now. And I'm encouraged also by the concrete hooks that Tineke has mentioned. I think we really need to make use of. And I think that in the meantime, it's important as much as possible to really, as I said before, call on governments to at least impose a moratorium on the use of the measure while we review much more carefully where it gets us and whether that's an advisable thing to be doing, especially here in Europe. So I look forward also to continuing the collaboration.
Thank you so much, and really thank you to all of the speakers for taking the time to be here today and for bringing all of these ideas of how to work together in the future at different levels. Thank you as well to all of you who have joined us today from all corners of the globe, and for your interest and commitment to these issues. We do look forward to staying engaged. We encourage you to read the thematic briefing that we've been discussing here today, share it with your networks as well, and you will get the link directly in your inboxes. And we are really looking forward to address the key issues that we highlighted today and the key recommendations. Just finally, as for the Statelessness Index, I just want to let you know that we'll be adding 3 new countries this year and updating the existing data for all the 27 countries. And our next thematic briefing will focus on statelessness determination procedures and protection status in Europe, to be published in September. So do stay tuned for that. And with that, I would just like to wish you have a great day, and thank you for being here to everyone, and stay safe and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good summer.
You too.
Thank you.